The suspect, Cole Thomas Allen, 38 years old, from California, United States, represents a chilling reality. There are individuals who pass through childhood without leaving behind any clear signs that they will one day become a danger to society. They grow up like everyone else, going to school, interacting with the world, forming early ideas about right and wrong, about dreams and their place in life. And if judged only from the outside, no one can pinpoint the exact moment when a person begins to drift away from a normal trajectory. Allen's case reflects precisely that pattern, an origin that appears unremarkable, yet ends in an act that forced an entire security system to respond instantly. There is little publicly available information about Allen's early life, but that very normalcy is what makes it significant. Individuals who follow a path of internal radicalization often do not require a single dramatic turning point. Instead, their transformation is gradual, almost invisible. It begins with a sense of alienation, a psychological state that is common yet often underestimated. When a person consistently feels misunderstood, disconnected, or unable to find their place in society, they may begin constructing their own internal framework to interpret the world. At first, these thoughts are fragmented. Over time, however, they develop structure, internal logic, and most importantly, a closed system. Once inside this system, the individual no longer seeks validation from the outside world because they have already built a reality that feels convincing enough on its own. Within that context, Allen's self-identification as friendly federal assassin is far from incidental. It reflects a deep redefinition of identity. The word assassin signals an acceptance of violence as a purposeful tool. Federal ties that imagined role to authority, governance, or a symbolic system of power, and friendly functions as a psychological buffer, softening the moral weight of the act. Together, these elements reveal a severe cognitive distortion, in which the individual not only justifies harmful behavior, but reframes it as something positive. This marks a critical turning point. Once a person no longer perceives their actions as wrong, the internal barriers that would normally restrain them begin to disappear. The transition from thought to action is not sudden. It is a process. Available information indicates that Allen made deliberate preparations, traveling from California to Washington, D.C., securing accommodation near the event location, carrying weapons, and selecting a target with high symbolic value. These details rule out impulsivity. Instead, they point to a plan that was formed and reinforced over time. Individuals who act in this pattern are not primarily concerned with escape. They are more focused on the impact of their actions, how they will be perceived, what kind of mark they will leave behind. In other words, they are not merely committing an act. They are attempting to inscribe themselves into a narrative. The event Allen targeted was organized by the White House Correspondents Association, a gathering that brings together media figures and influential individuals within the American political system. The presence of Donald Trump further heightened the sensitivity of the occasion. Choosing such a target was not random, it was symbolic. It suggests that Allen was not simply seeking an act of violence, but an act capable of generating attention, shaping perception, or, at the very least, reinforcing his belief that he was confronting something larger than himself. As he approached the security checkpoint, the psychological state of someone like Allen is unlikely to have been panic. Instead, it is more accurately described as focused determination. Individuals who undergo internal radicalization often reach a level of near absolute certainty about their actions. They no longer weigh options in terms of should or should not. Instead, they think in terms of when and how. For this reason, the moment the gunshot was fired was not an emotional outburst, but the culmination of a sustained chain of decisions. The fact that a Secret Service agent was struck but survived due to body armor underscores both the seriousness of the threat and the effectiveness of the security response.
After the shot was fired, events unfolded rapidly. Security forces responded almost immediately, subduing the suspect and preventing further escalation. This moment marked the collision between Allen's internal reality and objective reality. What had previously existed only in his mind, his role, his mission, his beliefs, was now confronted by a concrete legal system with clear charges and tangible consequences. He was brought before a federal court, facing serious accusations such as assaulting a federal officer and using a firearm in a violent act, with the possibility of charges related to an attempted attack on a head of state. The outcome of this sequence is not merely the arrest of an individual, but a reaffirmation of societal boundaries. When an act is prosecuted at the federal level, it ceases to be a purely personal matter and becomes an issue of national security. This implies severe punishment, potentially life imprisonment, intended both as retribution and deterrence. On a deeper level, however, it raises critical questions about how internal radicalization processes can develop undetected and without timely intervention. From a criminal psychology perspective, Allen fits into a category of offenders who construct their own ideological framework without direct guidance from an organized group. This type is particularly dangerous because it is harder to identify in advance. There are no clear communication trails, no command structures, no shared operational plans. Everything occurs within the mind of a single individual, fueled by emotion, interpretation, and self-reinforcing beliefs. When these elements converge, they can generate a powerful internal drive, strong enough to trigger violent action without any external catalyst. Based on the available information, it is likely that Allen's legal future will be severe. Given the level of preparation and the nature of the target, a heavy sentence is almost inevitable. Psychologically, the key question is whether his belief system will collapse. In many similar cases, individuals continue to see themselves as victims of an unjust system, refusing to acknowledge wrongdoing. In others, prolonged exposure to reality within a controlled environment leads to a breakdown of those beliefs, often resulting in deep psychological crises. Regardless of which path unfolds, this case stands as a stark illustration of how a person does not need an extraordinary background to arrive at an extreme outcome. It is enough for distorted thoughts to go unchecked, to be nurtured in isolation, and to be reinforced over time. When that happens, they can form a reality powerful enough to override social norms. And once that line is crossed, the distance between thought and action becomes so thin that a single decision is all it takes to make everything irreversible.